Variables. They're one of the most fundamental concepts in programming, and once you get the hang of them, you'll find them everywhere in code. Here's an easy way to understand what a variable is. Think of a variable like a container or a box that you use to store information. Just like you can put a toy in a box and label it toys, you can store data in a variable and give it a name. And this name lets your program know where to find the data whenever it needs it. Now, why do we even use variables? Because they let you save information so you can use it later in your code. For example, if you're making a game, you might use variables to keep track of the player's score, the time left on the clock, or the character's health points. They allow your program to remember and manipulate data as it runs. But how do we declare a variable? To declare a variable, you just give it a name and assign it a value. Simple as that. It's like saying, hey computer, remember this for me. But before you start creating variables, you need to understand what data types are. They tell your computer what kind of data a variable is storing. Integer is one of them. There's just whole numbers like 13 or -3, great for counting things like scores or levels in a game. We also have floats, numbers with decimals like 3.14. And floats are perfect for prices, measurements, and any math that isn't just whole numbers. Strings is another data type. It's just text data like hello world or your name. Strings are used for anything you can type out in words. And we also have booleans, true or false values. Think of them like light switches, on or off, perfect for tracking yes/no conditions in your program. And we also have other data types like lists or dictionaries and so on, and we'll get to them in a later video. So all in all, each data type serves a unique purpose, and knowing which one to use makes your code more efficient. Now let's take a look at some of the key points or some common mistakes about variables. The first one is naming. You can name your variable almost anything, but the name should make sense, like score or age. A variable named score is much clearer than x, for example. Imagine trying to remember what x does at 2 AM while debugging. Not fun. So avoid random names like x unless it's for something really temporary, and keep it descriptive. Misspelling variable names is also another common mistake. Always double check your variable names because score and scroll are considered two different variables. Using the wrong data type is another one. We need to be mindful of what kind of data a variable holds, because we can't just add numbers to text directly, as it will cause errors. And lastly, but the most important one, is hard coding values instead of using variables. It makes your code harder to maintain, prone to errors, and less readable. And trust me, once you get to team-based environment, code readability is very crucial. So always use your variables for the values that might change or need to be reused. The future you will thank you. Now, let's look at a simple example to illustrate variables in action. Let's say you're building a small program to calculate the area of a rectangle. We first create two variables, length and width, to store the dimensions of the rectangle. And we use these variables to calculate the area, length times width, and store the result in another variable called area. And finally, we print out the result. And there you go, we just created a simple use case of using a variable. Now, variables are like memory of your code, keeping tracks of things so that you don't have to. And once you understand how to use them, you can start building more complex and dynamic programs. And there you have it, the basics of variables and data types. I hope that was instructional. Feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.